Hello, Ivy here. This week's podcast is entitled Cut Toxic Family Out of Your Life. Episode 86. Introduction. The British royal family are promoted as the figurehead family for the UK. The family that represents what Great Britain stands for. At least that is the way the media describe them. And how they set the tone of every article. Over its 1,000-year history, the British royal family has been known to argue between themselves, and there has always been a scapegoat of each royal family chosen and used as distraction, in order to make all the others look perfect, in whatever way the publicity methodology devised at the time was deemed appropriate. I don't doubt that all monarchies functioned in a similar way, but for this podcast, we will stay with the UK example. The topics that I touch upon in this podcast, in the main, applies to any group of people that you regard as family. Family does not have to be blood relatives, and there is risk in regarding blood relatives, or whoever you regard as family, as being pivotal in the way you make decisions about your life. Like all relationships, much depends on the interaction between you and the family group, and dependent upon how that impacts your life in other ways. That relationship between different family members may vary and could change over time. Time could span decades. All family groups have highs and lows, and most things can be sorted. However, if there have been experiences which have led to various forms of trauma, including experiences from childhood, the responses will vary as time moves on, and life experiences begin to cement certain conclusions in one's mind. Always remember, no one else can tell your story like you can, with your lived experiences, and whatever decisions you make, they are yours to make. Well-meaning family members, as well as friends, will have lots to say, with good intentions in most cases, but ultimately the decision has to be yours. One thing that you need to be cognizant of is not to make decisions based on how members in that family group, or one member in that family group, feels about your behaviour towards them, or your intention to change the rules of engagement in the future. Let's have a look at the next section. Blood is not thicker than peace of mind. There are many phrases and verses and quotes regarding blood and family, etc. One of them I particularly liked, and it is this. Family isn't always blood. It's the people in your life who want you in theirs. The ones who love to see you smile and who love you no matter what. When your family is a high-profile one. In the case of the Sussexes, so much has been written about and discussed in the media, both written and televised, since 2016, and all of it coming out of the UK is negative, and most of it is speculation, and some of it is downright lies. But it sells copy. Unlike in most nations, it is considered fair game to work that way in this country, i.e. the UK. I would dearly love to see the same things done to all the high-profile media people who take great delight in working towards destroying their targets. Have those media individuals, have people hanging around outside the homes of friends and family and climbing fences or cutting holes into fencing for the facilitation of a camera lens, and then for the said family members to give interviews about their interactions with the said media hacks, and be paid for it too. Oh, how wondrous that would be. But that is unlikely to happen, unless those media individuals are held accountable for what they write and say in front of cameras for notoriety and coins. Both Harry and Meghan have toxic families. Both families have created toxic environments at various points in childhood for their children. Both families are in the media gaze for different reasons, but the glue that forms the chain that links them is the media, and the links on the chain are Harry and Meghan, in that order. By that I mean both families are toxic, and neither know boundaries, and both families have been less than stellar in their children's upbringing. Thank goodness for Meghan's mother, and equally relatives on the maternal side of the crew. In my opinion, Meghan is much further along when it comes to having boundaries relating to her family, and has stuck by them, and it seems that she is handling it well, considering all the debris around them this last 6 years. I think Harry has much further to go, but I have faith he will succeed, not least because his role as a husband and father is pivotal to him and for him. I do, however, also believe that it will take some time to reach conclusions on various aspects of his family and their actions throughout his life, which continue today. I don't know this couple, and I will never know this couple. My thoughts are based on my observations over the years and my work as a qualified psychometric personality profile consultant by 2 renowned professional bodies during my career as a chartered member of Institute of Personnel Development prior to retirement. Just need to make that clear, that I am not an expert, but I know far more than the carnival of experts wheeled out from under their stones to have to hear utter, complete nonsense about people they don't know. Just like I don't know this couple. Topics that they are not qualified to discuss or reach conclusions on, but who do it with the agenda of spouting negative, destructive information to media for coins. How to set boundaries with a family member. This is an extract from an article taken from a series called Drawing Lines, written by Sarah Ruddin in Allure on November the 13th, 2019. There is a powerful image in the article, and there will be a slide in the podcast itself, in the video podcast, and that work was done by Stephanie De Angelis. It is not uncommon to hear the word boundaries thrown around today, particularly in New York City, where many folk add in casual conversation that they see a therapist. But when we talk about boundaries, we're usually referring to them as they relate to romantic and sexual relationships, and less so in our families. Yet familial boundaries often set the tone for how we view relationships of all kinds throughout our lives. When boundaries are blurry in our younger years, it can be hard to recognise healthy ones, which makes it more difficult to set them in our adult lives. Boundaries allow us to exist as individuals who are part of a larger social community. Good boundaries should be part of every relationship, personally and professionally. In order to develop good boundaries, we need to recognise what we want or need in certain situations. In instances where our boundaries have not been respected or heard, this can be difficult to identify because we may not realise that we have a right to set boundaries in the first place. And that statement comes from Julie Fraga, a licensed psychologist based in San Francisco, who focuses on women's health and wellness. More of her work and research papers are in the reference sources. How might a person's upbringing affect the way in which they set boundaries? Children tend to model the behaviour of their caregiver or caregivers, so consider what this means for those of us who grew up in a dysfunctional home, when proper communication patterns aren't developed. One often can't help but recreate those toxic relationships in adulthood. Dysfunction equals love. This may lead you to believe that you have zero power to set boundaries because no one will adhere to them, according to Julie Fragar. On the other hand, some who grew up without a good model for boundaries may use them as a way to obtain power over others. People growing up in traumatic homes often feel out of control, and as a result may also grow up to be overly controlling with others as a way to maintain some sense of safety. So says Patrice N. Douglas, a marriage and family therapist based in California. This can cause codependency issues or a lack of ability to assert one's needs, which in turn allows fewer opportunities for authentic connection and warmth. Two things that are necessary for the growth of healthy relationships. How do you set boundaries with toxic people? An extract from another reference source listed below. It isn't easy to set boundaries with toxic people, but it's something we can all learn to do, and when we do, it's empowering. Boundaries are a way to take care of ourselves. When we set boundaries, we are less angry and resentful because our needs are getting met. Boundaries make our expectations clear, so others know what to expect from us and how we want to be treated. Boundaries are the foundation of happy, healthy relationships. Ideally, people will respect our boundaries when we communicate them clearly. But we all know that some people will do everything they can to resist our efforts to set boundaries. They will argue, blame, ignore, manipulate, threaten, or physically hurt us. And while we can't prevent people from acting like this, we can learn to set clear boundaries and take care of ourselves. We don't get to choose our family. We get to choose our friends, and if we have a falling out, we can end the friendship. But families are different in that we don't get to pick our family, and for good or bad, they will always be attached to us in some way. Every family has its problems, and there are many ways that relationships and communication between family members can become less than ideal. Red flags of toxic family dynamics. An environment that includes blaming, punishing, controlling, criticism, dismissal, or any form of abuse may be red flags that indicate a toxic family dynamic. Sometimes family members may start blaming other people for their problems and not taking accountability if the problems are their fault. They usually see themselves as the victim and refuse to accept any accountability for mistakes or wrongdoing. Others may not even know they are misplacing blame and may need to be corrected. Often the blame is accompanied by a punishment. Don't confuse punishment with discipline. Discipline is meant to teach a child right from wrong. When a child performs an undesirable trait, they need to be corrected. Sometimes discipline is enforced through punishment, such as grounding a child. Toxic punishment is when there is no lesson being taught. Some parents will punish children because they're having a bad day, and a child unintentionally said something to make them angrier, so they respond excessively and the punishment doesn't fit the offence. In your adulthood, if your parent is still trying to punish you, such as not talking to you when you do something they don't like, then that is toxic behaviour. They are controlling. Here are a few signs of a controlling family member. They are always meddling in your adult life, and they won't stop bothering you about your decisions despite the fact that you've told them your 2 cents worth, so to speak. They used money or another offer to try to control you. They installed tracking apps on your devices without you knowing. They control every move you make, even down to how you dress or look. They may make threats all the time as a means to control you. Abuse in any form is unacceptable. Not all abuse is physical or sexual. Abuse may also be mental or emotional. Psychological abuse involves a person's attempts to frighten, control, or isolate you. It's in the abuser's words and actions, as well as their persistence in these behaviours. On the other hand, some who grew up without a good model for boundaries may use them as a way to obtain power over others. People growing up in a traumatic home often feel out of control, and as a result may also grow up to be overly controlling with others as a way to maintain some sense of safety. This can cause codependency issues or a lack of ability to assert one's needs, which in turn allows fewer opportunities for authentic connection and warmth, 2 things that are necessary for the growth of healthy relationships. How to set boundaries with toxic family members. This is a very short extract from an edition of Psychology Today, written by Rachel Zoffness. Complete article is in the reference sources. 1. Value yourself and your time. You are important and deserve to be treated well. Actively opt to surround yourself with people who build you up instead of tearing you down. Imagine what your life would be like if you exclusively spent time with people who adored and valued you. 2. Give yourself permission to do what is best for you. It is important to have healthy boundaries, regardless of whether or not others understand and accept them. Limiting time with toxic people is an act of self-love. 3. Know your triggers and anticipate them. Always be one step ahead of your triggers by knowing A, what they are, B, what emotions arise, C, how best to take care of them, and D, how you'll plan to respond once triggered. 4. Be clear about your needs and communicate them. Identify your needs and boundaries in advance. You may ultimately decide that you don't want to have a relationship with an abusive family member at all. And while that may be very painful, that's okay too. It's your life and your precious time. Once you've identified your limits, communicate them clearly and kindly. 5. Practice saying no. A people pleaser who hates disappointing others finds it hard to say no, especially to his family. It's noted that no's are more difficult than others. Soft no's are easier than hard no's. A soft no leaves room for potential yes in the future. Hard no's are firm and finite. Setting limits not only makes you feel stronger, because you are standing up for yourself, but it communicates to others that you know your needs and aren't scared to state them. As uncomfortable as setting them may be, boundaries are good for relationships, not bad. 6. Make a list of coping strategies. Make a list of coping strategies in advance of a triggering event that will help you get through it. These can include going for a walk, having a designated friend to whom you can vent, carving out alone time, joining an online support group, getting a therapist, lifting weights, journaling, meditating, bringing along a friend for support, or skipping it altogether. Your time is yours, holidays or not. Set boundaries. Take care of yourself. You are worth it. Trauma bonding. What is trauma bonding? This is an extract from Medical News Today and, as usual, listed in the reference sources below. Trauma bonding is a psychological response to abuse. It occurs when the abused person forms an unhealthy bond with the person who is abusing them. The person experiencing abuse may develop sympathy for the abusive person, which becomes reinforced by cycles of abuse, followed by remorse. Stockholm Syndrome is one type of trauma bonding. A trauma bond is a connection between an abusive person and the individual that they abuse. It typically occurs when the abused person begins to develop sympathy or affection for the abuser. This bond can develop over days, weeks, or months. Not everyone who experiences abuse develops a trauma bond. Stockholm Syndrome is a specific type of trauma bond. While this term typically refers to someone who is captive developing positive feelings for their captors, this dynamic can occur in situations and relationships. Humans form attachments as a means of survival. Babies become attached to the parents or caregivers whom they depend upon, and adults form attachments to others who provide comfort or support. When someone's main source of support is also their abuser, a trauma bond can develop. An abused person may turn to the abusive person for comfort when they are hurt, even if the other person was the one who caused it. In the article, you will see under this extract a small section of my thoughts on this particular area of the article, and it's in italics, so it stands out from the actual extract. And it says, "My thoughts on this area of the article. When looking at the UK royal family and the way it is set up, whereby the monarch and the eldest son have control of the purse strings, and, in so doing, pretty much control the destiny and type of lifestyle of their family members, and the wider royal family. So when you hear or read the words such as main source of support, can also be the abuser, think of the things that both the current monarch and the eldest son have done to Harry and Meghan since 2016. I don't need to list them here, but abuse of various types is on the list, and I consider that the Royal Rota crew part of that scenario too, not least because they are acting on behalf of the British royal family by pursuing a non-working royal and one who is independently funded and living on another continent, and most importantly, has no contractual obligations to cover and report on anything that Harry and Meghan do. All of these actions by the British royal family and raw reporters are abuse under the banner of coercive control, which is the key theme in the Sussex Global UK Human Rights Campaign. Signs of trauma bonding. Dependence. A person may develop a trauma bond because they rely on the abusive person to fulfill emotional needs. For example, a child relies on their parent or caregiver for love and support. If that caregiver is abusive, the child may come to associate love with abuse. Believing that this association is normal, the child may be unable to see the abusive caregiver as bad. The child may instead blame themselves for the abuse as a way of making sense of what is happening to them. This allows the caregiver to continue being good, in inverted commas, in the child's eyes, which reinforces their bond. Cycles of abuse. Some abusive relationships follow a pattern of abuse, then remorse. After causing harm, an abusive person may promise to change. Some may be especially kind or romantic to make up for their behaviour. This gives the abused person hope that their suffering will end and that they will one day receive the love or connection that the perpetrator has promised. The person experiencing the abuse may see suffering as a price to pay for kindness. Remorseful behaviour may also cause the abused person to feel grateful, particularly if they have become accustomed to poor treatment. This reinforces the bond. Signs of trauma bonding. The main sign that a person has bonded with an abuser is that they try to justify or defend the abuse. They may also agree with the abusive person's reasons for treating them badly, or try to cover for the abusive person, or argue with or distance themselves from people trying to help, such as friends, family members, or neighbours, or become defensive or hostile if someone intervenes and attempts to stop the abuse, such as a bystander or a police officer, or be reluctant or unwilling to take steps to leave the abuse situation or break the bond. A person bonded with their abuser might say, for example, "He's only like that because he loves me so much. You would not understand." Or, "It is my fault. I make them angry." It is worth noting that these feelings of attachment do not necessarily end when the person leaves the harmful situation. A person may still feel loyal or loving towards the person who abused them, or who feels tempted to return. Breaking a trauma bond. Breaking a trauma bond can be challenging and may take time, but it is possible. The National Domestic Violence Hotline suggests that people, 1. Focus on the present. Hope that an abusive person will change, or nostalgia for good times in the past can keep people in their trauma bonds. Try to acknowledge what is currently happening and the impact that it has by pausing to reflect on it. If it is safe to do so, keep a diary. Focus on the evidence. If a person continues to abuse or takes no steps to get help, stay focused on this rather than on their promise about the future. Practice positive self-talk. Abuse can lower a person's self-esteem and make them feel that they cannot be without the abusive person. Noticing negative self-talk and challenging with positive alternatives can start to change this. Practice self-care. Taking care of oneself may help relieve some stress and reduce the desire to turn to an abusive person for comfort. Journaling, meditation, exercise, hobbies, prayer, or talking to trusted friends can help. Safety planning. Safety plans include personalised steps that an individual can take to protect themselves physically and emotionally. The plans may include safe places where someone can go to protect themselves, children or pets from violence, names and contact information for people who provide support, information about local organisations and services, a way to gather evidence of the abuse, such as a journal with events and dates that a person keeps in a safe place, a plan to leave, considering factors such as money, a safe place to live and work, a plan for staying safe after leaving, which may include changing locks and phone numbers, altering working hours, and pursuing legal action. Breaking the trauma bond of narcissistic parents. When you've been raised by a narcissistic parent, your sense of normal family life can be tragically skewed. You may not be totally sure that your own childhood and adolescence were different until you reach adulthood and are able to gain distance and perspective on what exactly was wrong in your household. Unfortunately, many true narcissists do not have the self-awareness necessary to recognise that their behaviour doesn't fit with normal expectations regarding behaviour exhibited by fully functioning adults. They have developed the traits associated with narcissism over many years, and when others in their orbit didn't play by the narcissist's rules, they replaced them with someone who would be a better sidekick. Thus, their behaviours have been reinforced through their relationships rather than extinguished. And it states, for these parents, having a child assert their independence, no matter how old the child might be, may rank among the most excruciating narcissistic injuries they may suffer. But remembering that narcissists don't actually feel emotions the way other people do may provide you with the support you need to finally break the unhealthy bond that keeps you from asserting your independence and living the type of life that you deserve. End of that section in bold. Breaking the trauma bond. The trauma bond is the type of emotional attachment that forms between abusers and victims. This type of bond describes the attachment between narcissistic parents and their children, and these attachments can maintain their grip even as children grow into adults. The hallmark traits that identify trauma bonds include an imbalance in power between the parent and child, a mixed pattern of both negative and positive engagement from the parent, a confusing experience for the child in that they are grateful for the parent's positive attention, but also feel responsible for and deserving of blame for any negative attention, and a child's shaping of their self-esteem filtered through their perceptions of their parents' esteem for the child. When you are ready to begin untangling yourself from the trauma bond between yourself and your narcissistic parent, accept that this may be much harder than you had planned. This next section of the article is in bold. I've put it in bold because of its linkages with our subjects. Perhaps even more than any other person in a narcissistic's life, they may perceive a child of any age as a possession to which they have total rights of ownership. You are a prized supply to their narcissism, and to remove yourself from their hold and to establish yourself as a fully independent and separate individual is one of the most significant narcissistic injuries that your parent might suffer. Because of the magnitude of the injury, finding your way out of the bond may be hindered by the efforts of your parent to maintain their unhealthy hold on you. Don't let yourself be deterred by the drama that your parent creates around your actions to cut yourself out of the narcissist's Gordian knot. Every point of engagement is more fuel for the narcissist's pathological behaviour. How to separate without harming yourself. 1. Create boundaries that you are willing and able to maintain. Isolating your parent from your life is not always easy, depending on the level of obligation and guilt they have instilled in you. Recognize that less opportunities for contact translate into more opportunities to build a healthier sense of self and healthier relationships with others. 2. When your parent attempts to cross a boundary or draw you back into their twisted bonds, keep up your guard and refuse to engage emotionally. Admitting that your parent's behaviour is affecting you is feeding the narcissist. Refuse to serve as a supply for their power and pain games. 3. When narcissists throw grown-up temper tantrums or make threats, treat them as you would a small child engaging in those behaviours. You don't give in to their demands, and you also rely on logical or natural consequences for misbehaviour in children too. Let your parents know your limits and the potential consequences if they try and push past them, and enforce the consequences. And in brackets, my family and I will be heading home if you continue to insult, threaten, tease me, us in any way. Close brackets as an example. 4. If any contact is too much contact, go no contact. Some people feel this is too extreme for their situation, but it is necessary for others. Going no contact can leave some individuals feeling like an orphan of sorts, but it allows for the creation of a family of choice, where relationships are built on mutuality and respect. 5. If no contact is a no-go, consider using the grey rock technique. When in the company of the narcissist, engage only from the neck up. Don't risk being vulnerable or engaging your feelings or heart. Rather than investing in a conversation, keep your responses brief, non-committal, and devoid of feelings or questions. Avoid eye contact too. Keep to mundane topics, like the weather or other factual topics. Don't express opinions or ask questions. Unfortunately, this type of non-engaged interaction requires you to stifle your own normal reactions, which can be a challenge in itself. Grey rocking is a technique for specific situations with specific individuals, not a healthy way to engage with those who care about you or with whom you want to maintain or deepen intimate relationships. This last section is another article from Psychology Today, written by Chloe Williams, dated 13th of May 2021. And as usual, the full article is in the reference sources below. Conclusion. One would think that a narcissistic parent would stand out in a crowd, but this is not true. Narcissists go to great lengths to look and act as good parents in public, all the while mistreating their children at home. To help in recognising a narcissistic parent, please see the list below. Always needing everything to be about them. Brags to others about their children's accomplishments, but not to their children. Always blames others for the problems that result from their bad behaviour. Uses guilt copiously and brags about how much they do for you. Utilises any of the 3 manipulative behaviours: blaming, shaming and guilt-tripping. Use negative comparisons between one child against another. Places unrealistic pressures on their children to succeed so they will look good. Manipulates by way of rewards and punishments. Uses emotional coercion to force their children to measure up to their expectations. The list above does not begin to cover the ways narcissistic parents can harm their children. The healing journey to overcome narcissistic parents. Healing from narcissistic abuse that occurred in childhood is an arduous and complicated road. However, if one wishes to live a full and happy life, then you must begin to work on the issues caused by the narcissist. It may be necessary to maintain a distance and have no contact with the narcissistic parent. This may seem harsh, but until you get your sea legs, it may be the best thing you can do for yourself. Beware, the narcissist in your life will become infuriated by your standing up for yourself. Still, they will get over it in time. Remember, their focus is on themselves, not you. Below, we will discuss 4 of the steps to moving towards emotional independence and healing. 1. Acknowledge the abuse that happened. This is perhaps the most painful part of healing. No one wants to admit to themselves that their parent did not love them, but used them for their own ends. However, it is vital to recognise that your parent did not treat you well. Acknowledging narcissistic abuse happened gives one the power to knock down the barriers that have held you back for so long. 2. Prepare yourself for some strong emotions. The trauma bond with a narcissistic parent is toxic, and breaking that trauma bond will set you up for a boiler room of emotions. These emotions might include grief, loss, anger, shock, sadness, depression, anxiety, shame, paranoia. It is imperative to remember that these strong emotions will pass as you gain more insight into who you are without your narcissist influence. 3. Set firm boundaries and stick with them. If you do not have the privilege of distancing yourself from your narcissistic parent, it is vital to set impermeable limits with them. All through childhood, the narcissist has walked all over any boundaries you may have tried to set. Now is the time to build some barriers over which the narcissist, or anyone for that matter, may not cross. This step is scary, as children of narcissists want to please their parents, but keep reminding yourself you cannot please them. Setting firm boundaries is essential to move towards independence. 4. Seek professional help. Do not be afraid to reach out to a mental health professional for advice dealing with the emotional damages done by a narcissistic parent. The emotions that may overcome you when healing will be intense and could lead to substance abuse or worse, suicidal thoughts. With the help of a competent therapist, there is no reason you cannot heal and achieve a sense of peace in your life. As one might see, recovery from a narcissistic abuse is not fun, nor is it for the faint of heart, nor does healing from the life damages done by a narcissistic parent happen overnight. It takes time and self-care to accomplish healing and become who you were always meant to be. This is an extract from CPTSD Foundation. Details and resource materials are available on the website listed below. And if you are wondering what CPTSD stands for, it is Complex Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder. To bring this podcast to an end, a reminder to think of Harry and Meghan and their respective families when reading or listening to these topics. Here are a few more relevant quotes on blood being thicker than water. Sometimes blood isn't thicker than water, and family will cross you quicker than strangers. Blood is thicker than water, but that does not mean blood cannot drown you just the same. Blood is thicker than water, but you can drown in either. Blood is thicker than water, but family isn't just about blood. Family is about faith and loyalty and who you love. If you don't have those things, I don't care what the blood says, you are not family. Whatever Harry and Meghan decide to do in relation to their family members, it is their business, not mine. My thoughts, like anyone else, other than the Sussexes, have no business placing expectations on the couple relating to the decisions they make on any subject. We know our families, but we do not know theirs. We have no idea of the relationships and ties that exist within the plantation behind gilded gates. I know what I would do in certain situations, and my choices would not be everyone else's in the same circumstances. The thing to remember is to respect someone else's choices in life. We can voice our opinions to people we know, but ultimately they have to reach certain conclusions on various behaviours for themselves. We cannot and should not voice our opinions on people we do not know about their life choices. Have an opinion by all means, but the cruel games being played by the royal family and its media and pals is a deliberate ploy to create activity which in itself generates income for the media and interest in a family who are fast going down the plug holes of life, and support is falling fast. That being said, I could post that on social media platforms, but I would never dictate what someone else should do. As things stand, I don't post my thoughts on a range of things, let alone tell someone else what they should do. I just ensure that I do not promote the contrived drama to encourage clicks for income. I go out of my way to ensure that the group of toxic clowns with apparent expertise in various topics do not earn money from my posting on any social media platform. I have views on the forthcoming coronation, and I've expressed those to a limited group of people. At no point have I advised what Harry and Meghan should do, and regardless of what they do, my support for them will still stand. In accordance with what I always do when it comes to royal events, I do not watch them, and I won't be watching in May, regardless of who attends or not. I am happy to read about it on social media platforms when the event is over, when I can pick and choose the minutes or seconds of footage that I will watch, if the Sussexes attend. Otherwise, I will do what I have always done, and that is to find something else to do when those type of events are dominating our screens. I plan to cut my lawn with scissors, or an activity with similar slow processes to fill the 3 days. Raw life and events have never interested me, and this UK royal family have no chance in Hades of getting me to change my mind. It is a part of history that I do not need to see or to tell my grandchildren about in the future. That's it for this week's podcast. The article is a little bit longer, as you would expect, and there's more images in the article too. So, it's goodbye from me for this week. Bye from Ivy. Bye.